All right, thank you and welcome back to the channel. First of all, happy holidays to everyone. This is going to be it looks like it's going to be the 6th video of this series on a Vue 3 Ionic Firebase CRUD sample application. I thought that I had finished this guy, but in the end, I saw a couple of people leaving comments waiting for the Firebase integration, and I realized I hadn't integrated Firebase. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. One last thing, how about as a gift from you to me, please make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. And also there's links below for signing up for my newsletter to get more great information on Ionic Framework, VueJS, and React.js. Okay, now we are going to get to the code. For those who don't remember the original application, here we go. It's just a modal dialog that takes in a title, test title, and a due date. And it saves the information. We integrated an alert to show you the alert, and then it displays the information. And then we also have the ability to edit the object by using the exact same modal, description changed. It indicates that the modal was updated. It updates the list. And then finally, you have the ability to delete the object from the list. Now, the current way I'm storing the data is I'm just keeping a map of the data that's being stored. What we want to do is we want this data to exist beyond the one instance. And so what we're going to do is we're going to integrate Firebase. But before we get started with Firebase, I'm going to make it clear you need to pause if you don't know how to get Firebase project set up and check out. There's a bazillion videos online that show you how to do it, so I'm not covering it here. So go set up your Firebase database and then come on back. Okay, now that we're back, we are going to start in datastore. A couple of things to know. The pattern that I'm using, I'm storing my keys inside of this .env file. I'm clearly not going to open it and show it to you because it will, then you'll be able to kind of see what my keys are. But in the description below, I'll talk to you about how you set up this .env file. But in the end, after you set up this .env file, you end up with a specific key that you need to use. And we're going to load that key in, which will give us access to our project ID. One of the first things you need to do is you need to install Firebase, which I've already done so that you don't have to go through the process. And if you look at my, see, so Firebase is already installed. You install it by just doing npm install Firebase and you get everything you need. So let's go to datastore and start making the changes that need to be made. I mean, clearly the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to import Firebase. So we now imported Firebase. We're going to switch this list data from reactive to just a ref. I'm going to go easy on types in this example because I've gotten feedback that a lot of people are kind of getting overwhelmed by TypeScript. So I'm just going to stay with the any for my TypeScripts. I just said TypeScripts. For my TypeScript definitions, we're going to switch this to a reference here. So now we have a reactive array that will keep track of all the items that are saved. The other thing I'm going to do in this original example, I was kind of returning all my functions were embedded in the return. I'm going to just start initially by moving all of these out of here. And we're going to just create normal functions up here at the top. Not that, I don't want to paste that. I wanted to paste these functions. So let's just copy all these functions out of here. Is that listed? Yeah. Cut. We're going to paste them all up top here. We're going to create normal functions. So let's say const. These are all going to be async because they're all going to return a promise. And so that's that one. We don't need that anymore. Let's change that. We're going to set this to be a const, C-I-N-S-T, S-Y-N-C, A, I can't spell, async, I can't spell, async, add or update. So it's delete, add or update, and so those are all switched over. And then now we'll we still need to return them, so we need to return a delete item. So let's put this down here, and then the add. What is this guy? Add or update. So we're returning these guys. So these are the functions that are going to be returned from this component. All right, so that's first. Firebase is defined by every user. All right, stay calm. We're about to use Firebase. All right, so after you use Firebase, clearly you need to initialize and use Firebase. So to initialize and use Firebase, we are going to set that up here. Well, let's just put it up top right underneath Firebase. So this is the environment variable that I'm creating. So you're going to create an environment variable with this name, view_app_Firebase project ID, and you're going to store it in your .env file, and that's how we're going to load it. So this initializes the Firestore database, which we use, and we create this constant called DB. So we don't want to have to kind of do this over and over again. And then the other thing we're going to do is we are going to create a constant for the collection that we are going to work with. And so we just say db.collection. Firebase stores things in collections and documents. And so we create our collection. And for the purpose of this, we're just going to name our collection item collection, TION. And then we're going to name our collection item collection. So for all of the functions below where we actually need access to the collection to manipulate it, we will just use this constant that we've created. Okay, so let's start with the obvious. The obvious is that we need to actually load items. In Firebase, let's kind of give me some more space. In Firebase, when you load items, you basically load what they call query snapshots. And so that's what we're going to do here. We're going to create a new function called const load data, async, of course. And that's going to return, actually, it's not going to return the data. What we want it to do, we really need it to do two things. A, potentially return the data if someone wants to call it. Actually, no, we're not going to return the data. We're just going to set. We want everyone to get their data from list data. So here inside of load data, after we load the data, sorry, I hate that thing. After we load the data, we're going to set our list data value, which is returned below, and anyone who uses this service can get access to the data that way. Actually, just to get this back kind of centered for me, so I can look like I'm looking at the camera, we'll put this over here. The way that things work with Firebase is that you load a query snapshot. And so what this says is, get my item collection, just give me everything in it. And then after the snapshot is declared, you have to iterate through the snapshot and get all the values from the snapshot. So to iterate through the snapshot and get all the values from the snapshot, this query snapshot, as you can see when I hover over this, it returns a list of Firebase documents. We're going to loop through each one of the documents. We're going to get all the data from the document. We're going to get the ID from the document, and then we're going to assign our list data value to hold this. So, warning, load data is assigned a value but never used. Remember, because this is a reference, when we're using it internally, we have to put the value on it. And so that's why we have the value on there. And so now our value is set. Everything's fine. And then what we want to do is let's just return true if it's successful. Otherwise, it will throw an error, and that error will get returned to the caller. The other thing that we want to do is we want to make sure on startup we load whatever data is in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the view callback onMounted. And what we're going to say is when this guy is first mounted, just call load data. And since it's async, we're going to call await load data, and that should load whatever data we have in a database for us. onMounted, can't find any. Oh, let's add onMounted to our view reference above. onMounted, so everybody should be happy. Must use .value to read or write a value wrapped in ref. Must use value to read or write a value wrapped in ref. Datastore. Oh, it's complaining about these other places that are using it. So let's see if I can just comment them out to get this thing to compile for now. All right, it compiled. Let's use our debugger to see if we got anything interesting happening here. Let's validate the value. All right, so the caller, the function's using this is complaining. So let's clean. Now let's go over to our home view. Since we are actually loading some data. There's some data in the database from an earlier run of this. So let's now go to list data and see who's calling it. So if we go to my home view, my home view previously was using list data here. And we had this compute function. Where did it go? We were computing the data because remember before my list data was stored as a map. It's not stored as a map anymore, so we don't have to go through all this. So in theory now we can completely remove display list. And what we can do is we can just pass list data back to my template. And so now if let's go up to my template and make sure my template is set up properly. So now my template needs to use list data here. And let's give it a run and see what we get. I'm still getting some errors over here. Oh, so here's all of the ones that I created previously that got loaded at startup. Okay, so since we already have some here, let's work on, because you know how we have the ability to edit the items. So let's work on modifying an existing item. All right, so let's go into my data store. And inside my data store, see it's looking for an ID, and based on the ID, we know whether or not we need to create one or update one. So the interesting thing about all this is that we are going to use the collection that we created before so we can get our item collection. And let's go down here and we'll start below and then we'll remove that out of the code later. So we get our item collection, and then with item collection, we get the document. If we have an ID, we pass the ID in. And so we'll say ID. And then we do a set. See, when you do the set, it says writes the document referred to by this document reference. If this document does not yet exist, it will be created. If you pass set options, the provided data can be merged. So if it has an ID and we're updating, we're just going to say set. We're going to take the item data to the item, and then we're going to add the merge options. So, and then we're going to say merge. So what this will do is it will, if there's any existing fields that are in here, we'll merge those fields. And so that's, and then of course we want to return, and this is async, A-W-A-I-T. And so that will set a document, but that will only be called if we have an ID. So let's say if ID, then we're going to set the document. If we don't have an ID, then we need to create the document. And we're going to take this exact same code. We're going to do the return, except if you don't pass an ID, then Firebase will create a new document, give it an ID, and use the data. There's no need for this merge options here, so we'll just remove that. And that should be it for adding or updating a document. Okay. So now we have our add or update. So now we can add items and we can update items. And let's kind of remove this code from the bottom. Notice the great thing about this is we really didn't have to change our interface at all. But because we're being lazy right now and we want the list to update after a change, what we're going to do is after the add or update call is made, we are going to call load data. And since load data, we're going to need to take this return away from here because we want it to call load data before it returns. And then after load data is done, we'll return true to indicate that it was successful. And we want to do the exact same thing down here. So let's bring this down here. So we have that working. All right, so let's test the modified data, see if it works. So we have this Y modals. Let's click on this, bring up our modal, Y, new title. We're getting this kind of, so see it updated this, but we're getting this duplicate title going on here. So we need to handle that duplicate title appropriately. And what's happening is that in my home view, where's my function to, so the point we need to realize is all these are asynchronous now. So we need to actually wait for the result. So if I switch these to await, that should fix the multiple alerts that we're seeing. So let's just switch all of them to an await. So let's go await. So now they should be handled asynchronously. Let's refresh. Let's test this one now. So let's scan and test. Let's also show how we can change the due date on these guys. So let's change the due date to save. See, we only get the alert popping up once. We have the change, we have the new date, so we can see the changes working properly. Our list is getting updated properly. So now we have our items getting updated. Let's show adding a new item now. Happy holidays. Enjoy. And then we're going to change this to 1/1/2020. Done. Save. Added the new object. Where's it? I probably should sort this list where we didn't, but here's a new item that's added. And so we've now showed the add an item, we have our list, we've updated the item, and the last one is the delete. Let's just jump ahead because you know what's going to happen. So we need to call our await here. It's asynchronous, so async. Let's save this, and then let's now go back to our data store. And it's once again, Firebase makes it pretty simple. We just hop in here. We're going to say where to take the collection. We're going to get the item ID that is provided to us. And just like below, we need to update the list. So afterwards, we get the doc. So we get the collection, we get the document from the collection, and then there's a Firebase function delete, which we will call. And it returns a promise on success, which is exactly what we want. Remember, all these guys will throw an error if there's a problem, and the error will get caught by the parent. Let's just put a little comment thing to get it separated there. So now we have delete item, we get the ID, we delete it, if successful, then we reload the data and then we return true. So let's delete some of these old ones. This new item added, let's delete this. Deleted from the list. Let's delete all the old ones. Deleted from the list. These were all ones that I modified today. And so you can see they're still there. And just so that you know, everything actually got persisted. If I reload the database, you can see that it's brought all of the records back. So this was just a quick video to wrap everything up with Firebase. As I said, we'll just go back to it one more time at a high level. We initialize Firebase. We create our Firebase database using our project ID that's stored in the .env file. We create a constant for the collection that we're working with. We're going to keep an instance of all of our data inside of list data. So this is if anybody wants the data, this is how they can get access to it. We have a function that loads the data. We have a function that deletes the data. And then we have a function that adds or updates the data. And it knows to update the data if it gets past an ID. If it gets that, then it merges the data. If it doesn't get an ID, then it loads the data. When the application first starts up, we call load data to make sure we basically initialize our list data field property so that we can get it rendered in here. Let's go into our home view, into our, what's going on here? Into our home view, we're using our hook or composable, whatever you want to call it with Vue. We need access to our delete item function, our add or update function. If we wanted to use our load function, we could get access to it also, but we're not using it here. So these are the only three that we need. This is the information for the modal, which is covered in the other videos. This is the information for the alert, which is covered in the other videos. What we're using is this, we've created this function called setAlert, which allows you to define a whether the alert's open, a title, a subheader, and a message. So we can just use the exact same reactive object. So when we make changes to this, it will cause my view to re-render and then my alert to get updated. Here's how we show our modal dialog, which is a custom modal dialog covered in an earlier video. And then here we're actually using the functions. We can handle our delete, asynchronous. We can handle our this is our handling the response from the modal, which lets us know if the user canceled it or if we have to actually update an object. If we have an ID here, then we know we're updating. If we don't, then we know we're adding. And then that's it. I think the last thing that we could do is here's a delete. We don't have a nice dialog after the delete, so let's add that. So let's just stay consistent. After the delete, we can say set alert, deleted, item, and then what we'll say is item, deleted successfully. Let's see if this works right. And let's delete this guy. Item deleted successfully. Okay, so now we have our consistency, and we're going to wrap it there. Don't want to make anything too long here on our Christmas Eve. This is the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Happy holidays, and I will see you next time. This will probably be my last video for the New Year's, unless I kind of get bored during the long week, and I just have some ideas that pop in my head, and I just want to get it out. So enjoy the video. Take care, and I will see you next time.